All right, good morning, people. Bob here, back once again, ready to break down some Bitcoin. Let's say we get right down to it. Let's start daily view here. So I kind of actually, I think all in all, I kind of like what we ended up with here. So I think we ended up with a better high yesterday to finish out the day than I really thought we were going to. I really thought for sure we'd come back into this 22.1 range and flip that into resistance and then fall below here. But instead, Bitcoin made a push back up to about 22.4 to close the day. It actually hit about 22.6. We'll zoom in on the shorter term time frames here in a second. But it did basically exactly what it needed to here. So we've been talking about this concept recently, about the concept of a price mirror, right? So what we could see here at this point, as long as I think this holds on here today, right? Let's assume that this is how this goes down. This holds on here today. Tomorrow opens up to here, 22,450-ish, gets pushed down all the way into this range, eventually closes out the day here, and then this next day here ends up being the one that begins our ascent up the charts further. So that's one concept, right? I'm not saying it will happen, because I could show you a few things that would suggest that our move is getting ready to max out here as well. But there's at least feasibility of that, and I could maybe try to justify some of that logic here based on kind of this look right here. That you can almost see where Bitcoin on the RSI is forming this real nice parabola here. You can see the connection of the points. And I think, that would be logical, right? We would, you can see here that it would really need to probably, today it probably will not be a green day, and then it would turn, red to start the day tomorrow, and then potentially make that next move up. So you can see where that could be a logical scenario. I don't think that necessarily you could put that on here and get the same result, but you could look at that, and then it would be several days before we would actually see that upside push. But again, the RSI and the price action don't necessarily need to directly correspond. I mean, that's not an absolute necessity. Because you can find patterns in both that don't necessarily match perfectly. That being stated, though, this looks like it's a feasibility. But then the other thing I'm looking at here is that we've got this guy here, the stochastic RSI, looking like it wants to curl over here. Now, this is basically, we could call this one of a few scenarios here. This could be an ascending triangle pattern, at which point, this thing will curve over and then burst up here. But how often does that happen, right? How often does the stochastic RSI go into overbought and then go way up into overbought? Doesn't really happen. Now, what could potentially come out of this is that it breaks this trend line here in the next day or two, gets way oversold, even though the price action holds up pretty well, and then boom, right back up, and then turns this into a resistance, but puts in a higher high nonetheless. So that's, those things would correspond to this playing out fairly well. Whether it does or not is another story. Obviously, we know how that goes. But so the daily, that's a feasibility. The other scenario would obviously be that that we cannot sustain this upward motion, that we lose this trend line at around 21.8, 21.9 ish. And then we actually start a multi-day downtrend to get back to the trend line we've been riding. So it's tough to say. And then obviously we've talked about it. We lose that trend line, and all of a sudden we're back down here in the 17, 18s. But we'll assume for the moment that in fact we will continue to maintain this upward trend until it doesn't, right? Like until it does not, we will assume that it does. If we come up here to the top of this, and it doesn't look like it's going to go anywhere, then you could, short all the way through the pattern. But I don't know. whether right, wrong, or otherwise, I'm fairly convinced that this time is different than this time. I am fairly convinced of that. Just looking at what I see here. And again, based on the price mirror concept, I mean, that alone tells me that this has logic. And who knows? Maybe it actually comes down to this like 20,100 range again and just wicks down there. But we'll see how that all goes. But I'm more inclined, at least at the moment, to assume that we will get more upside before we actually start crashing back down to or through here. Again, I think there's a lot of logic that would suggest that this move here is going to take place in the coming days. Maybe not necessarily that Bitcoin is going to break up here, in the next 2-3 days, but it could. And I think at that point, what we're looking for is we at least want to, we want to see Bitcoin make a few more attempts at this $23,000 level between today and tomorrow, probably. Maybe the next, say, 48 hours for sure. And then, again, if we get a wick that comes down here into this like 21,000, 20,600, we'd look to go ahead and pick that up as a long. And again, I think right at 20,000, 20,060, 20,100, that should end up holding up, at which point, we ride that all the way up to and through potentially the top of this pattern. So we'll see. Let's zoom in on some other time frames here. Now the 4-hour chart, I was looking at that one this morning, and I'm not even sure what to make of this, honestly. Like this mess of garbage right here. Go ahead and look at the history of Bitcoin, and even just this period of time that we're looking at here, and I don't necessarily see a whole lot of price action that really matches what I'm seeing right there, right? Like this kind of does, but that was coming from a bearish move, and then it kind of bounced around until it fell off. Well, I mean, I guess I could say that if it did that here, and this came from a bullish move, then I guess I could make the argument that this thing should go up and through here. I don't know. It doesn't look like it would really want to based on what I'm seeing here. But there are 3 hours left in this current candle. But honestly, my best guess is that this thing comes up, let's say, into the 22.2, maybe the 22.4 range, and that this 4-hour candle actually closes down here at the level it's at now. And that's just a best guess. And if it doesn't close there, then what I would say is that chances are pretty good that over the next, say, hour to 2 hours, this thing does pop up here, like I said, and then it sells off real hard following that, and actually comes down here into this range, like 20,715. So I think those things are all potentially feasible. I just don't know which one's going to happen, because I just don't know, honestly, what to make of this little pattern here. We had a 4-hour double top with bearish divergence, and then this one here was he had another. I guess I can't even necessarily say that was a bearish divergence there, but yeah, I mean this one here. I mean somewhere between these several candles, there's definitely some bearish divergence. But again, I am going to look for this thing to come up into this range here in the next hour or two. But then I have concerns that it does not come up here necessarily. But like I said, these are the things we got to be looking for, because if it can shoot up here, then that leaves, if it can find a way to kind of pop up into this range, even if it's just a wick that comes up here, I mean, that's really what we're looking for, right? That'll help us to price mirror what we've got over here, which, again, I guess if we're sitting here and we want to talk price mirror, now that we're not looking at the daily chart and we got this 4-hour chart in front of us, then what we're doing right now, this seems logical, right? Then this will eventually look similar to this, except in the opposite direction. So, potentially, I mean, look, if we start to break out of, like these trend lines here, kind of this like plain white one and then this dash white one, we start to break out above those, I'm telling you right now, just wait, and you're going to see Bitcoin move like it's an altcoin or something, it's going to fire through all of these levels fairly quickly. And it maybe not, I mean, you can see here, these are 4-hour candles, but within maybe 2 days, Bitcoin's going to, potentially tack on a significant amount there. Let's just say that this is the level here and that within a few days we're here. Well, Bitcoin potentially, looking at about a 23% increase just to get back to here. Then, who knows? But yeah, I mean, that's feasible. That's feasible. Now, if Bitcoin dominance stays high, the alts are going to go with it. Just not they may not go up by 20%, but you might start seeing some alts jumping by 4, 6, 8, 10%. We're already seeing a lot of that. And as far as Bitcoin dominance goes, let's actually jump over there real quick. This is my short-term chart. We'll talk about that momentarily as well. But yeah, Bitcoin dominance, I mean, it's just dying. It's kind of funny to look back on this, and I mean, technically speaking, this could have been a descending triangle, which eventually would have pushed Bitcoin dominance down into places it's never been. Like this is the absolute lowest it's ever been right here, this line, and this was back in 2018. You can see that, which, to be clear, this is right around when Bitcoin had set its all-time high in the 2017-2018 bull run. So, and then it just took off from there. I assume that right here is basically when it started dying again. And then anyway, long story short, this thing could have been a descending triangle. Instead it broke out, but now it makes it seem pretty safe to say that this thing was really a fake out. That this action right here was just meant to get people out of the market while it was actually trying to bottom. And that ever since we hit this point, really, things have changed, right? I think we could all agree that since, June 10th approximately, things are different. And let's go back and look. Where's June 10th on here? Yeah, I mean, granted, it was still in the process of dying at the time, but immediately thereafter, within a week of that, and even right here, I guarantee you could see some altcoins that had started to move positively to the upside, even through here. So yeah, things have been changing, right? Like things are in fact a little different than they used to be. And a huge part of it is the fact that this thing has just been absolutely melting down. Now, that being stated, where do we potentially go to out of here? And this thing, all of a sudden, we're looking here. Now, if this all happens, say, in the next few weeks, right? Like if this thing just keeps dumping through here, it'll probably bounce back up and get knocked down again. But if this thing just keeps going ahead and just absolutely getting destroyed, altcoins are going to run over these next few weeks. Some of them already been running, right? We've already seen some of that taking place. So now let's actually, and I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit today, but let's go over to the hourly on the Heiken Ashi real quick. Again, the interesting thing about this chart to me is that, I think I kept this one fairly clean. I don't put a ton of trend lines on it, but this one here, I mean, this is where I could maybe make the argument that this is logical. This is one where I could make the argument that this looks very logical, that this essentially will be the barrier for the top until it's ready to actually spring up out of there. But on the hourly chart, I could make the argument that we do probably hit 23 and change today, come back down, 22,305, retest, and then boom, blast off time. And think about what day it is. So today's Tuesday. We come up here some point today, Wednesday. Wednesday probably won't be a great day then. And then Thursday, we know, we talked about it, Thursday into Saturday, Thursday to Sunday, this market tends to do well. Well, how much better can you get than a parabolic move by the weekend, right? So again, let's take a look here. What July coming up? Let's clear that out of there. So July 21st. Where's that on this chart? Oh, interesting. July 20th and then July 21st, right here at the apex of what would otherwise be a potential parabolic move out of here. So it lines up pretty logically. And then, the other big thing is you can look here. Here's a low. Here's a higher low. Here's a higher low. Here's a higher low. Higher low. Higher low so far. So, I mean, Bitcoin's doing everything it needs to maintain an uptrend. It's just tough to say, again, because you got, right now we got a 200 simple on the hourly that's down here. At some point, we probably got to come back and retest that, right? That would be a logical thing to do. And that's what we're talking about, right? Like, I'm sitting here and I'm essentially damn near contradicting myself because I'm telling you right now, I could see it coming up here, but I could also see it coming down here. And that's what I said looking at the daily. So I said looking at all these time frames. So, I mean, these things are all feasible. But that's not what we wanted. That's why. And then that's why we come in here to the shortest term time frames we have to work with. And all of a sudden you take a look here. Yeah. I mean, at least this got potential rounded bottom to it. Yeah, that's for sure. This could be problematic here. I mean, not problematic. I mean, it's only a 5-minute chart, but here you've got a scenario where you've got a high here on the price action. You got a high here on the price action. This one is they're pretty close to the same height right now, and yet the RSI would suggest that this does not have the strength that this move had. So, at that point, maybe we do lose this very soon. And that's another thing we know too. When you lose a rounded bottom pattern, it tends to be somewhere in about this zone here. If you don't lose it by here, chances are pretty good you are in fact going to make your way at least back to the top of it. So 22.7 would be a logical number there. I've got a bunch of trend lines coming through here, so you could say that 22.3, 22.4, 22.2 even. All these numbers could potentially be resistance right here, and then this thing starts to cascade down. If we lose this, then we're heading down to here, maybe even this like 702 here, so like 21.4. The only problem is that at that point we are no longer putting in higher lows. That would in fact be our first lower low when compared against the kind of the macro look, right? So obviously this low is lower than this one, but that's within a single consolidation move. We've got higher lows otherwise going back to each impulse move. So again, so those are kind of the things that we're going to be looking out for here. Those are the most important things at the moment. But yeah, again, I'd love to see this thing at least pop up right to here, because if it does, I feel much better about flipping this into support and then making our push up to these levels. We lose this, and like I said, we are probably coming down here. Now, I would say that we probably do double bottom. So, we potentially, if we do come back down here, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. Just because then we could potentially double bottom here. Got to hold this though. I mean, and that's probably the biggest thing altogether, is that if it's going to come back down here, it cannot lose these levels. This one here, 21,267. This one here, 28.98. Can't lose those levels. Can't lose those. Or downside seems more likely at that point. So we shall see what happens, but that gives us a pretty good idea what we're looking for. I think for today, I'd look for potentially a low in this 21,267 range ish. A high potentially 23,415. I'd say is a number I'd look for. But again, I don't necessarily think that number, if it gets hit, it probably won't be until much later today. Or even potentially into tomorrow. Maybe by the end of the day, Bitcoin is starting maybe it comes up off of these numbers down here, gets a nice solid bounce, and that by 8 o'clock, maybe we're closing out and we're like right here, and then from 8 to midnight, we're making a 4-hour like hard push to the upside. It's tough to say. Again, that's why you gotta, you can speculate all you want on these charts, and then at the end of the day, you just got to watch it happen and adjust accordingly. So that's what we shall do. Hey, we appreciate you as always. Looking forward to catching up again tomorrow at this point. And hey, we'll keep looking for those moves. You guys keep watching us kill it, and everybody wins. So, all right, we appreciate you. We'll catch up tomorrow.